Hi, I'm here with Marie Drake, Quality Engineering Manager at Zoopla. Today we're going to talk about getting started with learning test automation. I would like to welcome Marie here, and could you please tell me more about yourself?
Hey, Nicola. So, yeah, I'm currently a quality engineering manager, like you said. So, I've been in the software testing industry just for like over 9 years. Um, Before doing my role as a quality engineering manager, previously, I've actually worked as a principal test automation engineer in a company called News UK. So, it's also a UK based company. Um, I've also got a blog, so it's a testing and test automation blog that people might find useful. So it's at mariedrake.com. I'm also a Cypress ambassador, so some of my blog posts would be about, how I've used Cypress, things that I've learned about, Cypress, and share that to the wider community. And most recently, so I've started a YouTube channel called Testing with Marie. So I'm hoping that, going forward, that's also going to be useful to other people. But at the moment, I'm just doing a short videos about, how to use Git and GitHub for beginners. Yeah, I think that's all about myself.
Thanks, Marie, and I'll make sure to include your site and your YouTube channel in the description. Now, let's get straight into the questions. Um, let's start with why. Why did you learn test automation in the first place?
Yeah. So I've actually joined as a graduate test consultant when I, finished my bachelor's degree, and during that time, obviously, it was pretty much, I guess, like learning about the basics, so like the different types of testing, like the different techniques, and I guess a at a point in my career as a graduate consultant, I've seen some seniors like trying to use frameworks on how to use like test automation to help with testing. And because I've studied computer science when I was at uni, I wanted to apply what I've learned in terms of like programming, because I wanted to make sure that I can still practice the programming and like the coding skills that I've learned. Because I feel like if you're not trying to like code as actively, you tend to forget a lot of like the stuffs that you've learned. So I found test automation as a way for me to get back into writing code, like writing test code and like learning some new techniques. So it was mainly at first from that perspective, and as I went along, I became more like curious as to how test automation can really help within
Mm.
testing. Because when I was at uni, the only thing I learned about testing was how to use like JUnit, and there was nothing else, apart from that. So it was a completely new thing for me, and there was just like so many tools and like framework to use. So it was more of like how can I learn all these different tools to help with my testing. So that was my main motivation at the beginning.
Could I ask, so you did a grad program, and then was it part of the grad program that you had to set up a framework or like contribute to an existing test suite, or
Yeah.
did you
So
like initiative?
because it was a consultancy, the sort of program was pretty much dependent on like what the client needs. But um, when we first joined the program, like we had like an intensive like 2 months training, but nothing was ever like there was no mention about test automation. It was mainly about like the testing like methodologies, like the different techniques, like the boundary level, like the equivalence partitioning, but we didn't learn about
I
test
remember those.
automation. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So I felt that it wasn't really included in like the proper like curriculum. I only found out actually about tools like Selenium when I was on a client site, and one of the contractors, they were setting up like a framework using Selenium and Java. And at first I was like, oh, that's really interesting. I didn't know that, you can do that. And they were showing me like the different commands, like, oh, if you do, driver dot blah blah blah, then you can interact with the element. So it was really about like learning it on the job rather than having it as part of that graduate like testing, like, like program.
Did you also start with Selenium WebDriver with Java?
Yeah, I did.
Because
Yeah.
that was my first exposure to test automation. If you don't count Selenium IDE, where you got to like record and play, and then like edit the script on
Yeah.
which felt like fun at the time.
Yeah.
Now, how? So you're saying how, in terms of when you learned, you didn't. It wasn't part of the program, so you learned on site. So like you paired with
Yeah.
someone, or exactly how did you learn?
Yeah. So I guess it really helped that I was really curious about, how it works. So I started just asking like some of the contractors, like, how does it actually work? How do you write, a simple test? And it got to a point where I was actually working closely with another like software developer in test. So we got put into this project where he was responsible for adding, some automated tests, while us test consultants were in that project to, work with test cases. It was like a pretty like waterfall
Mm,
type of project. So when I had some downtime,
mm,
I would, sit next to him, like learn from him, like how the framework actually works. Because during that time, he was using like a data driven type of framework where he will enter like different inputs on an Excel like spreadsheet, and then that will then be read by the framework that he's created. So I guess to me, like when I first started learning, I was just doing it in, like some basic sort of stuff where what if I choose this specific drop down on the Excel spreadsheet, how will that, affect, the actual test. So it's just making some like small modifications and then understanding how that will impact, the rest of the flow. So yeah, it was mainly, from that. And then when I learned, the basics, I actually asked the company that I was previously part of if I can be moved to a project where I can, apply some of the test automation skills that I've started to like accumulate.
mm,
And I guess during that time, so um a um, a previous colleague of mine. So we actually went to the same uni. He was also working for a different consultancy, and then he just said, "Oh, we're looking for some test engineers, and most of our projects involve a lot of test automation. Are you interested?" And I guess yeah, during that time I just said, "Okay, yep, let's do it." And I know that I didn't, have the, I guess, the entire skills. Like I didn't know how to automate API tests by then. I only knew how to use like Selenium with Java. But to me, that opened up as, like as a as a stepping stone for me to learn other types of testing. So I grabbed the opportunity, and then working as a test engineer consultant also allowed me to work on different clients. And I guess the challenge about working as a consultant is sometimes you'll be put into a project where you don't actually know what the language that they're using, so you have to do a lot of like learning on the job. And I took that as a challenge because while I'm waiting to be put on into this like new project, most of my time were spent like trying to learn, okay, how can I use like Selenium for this specific language, or how can I try to create like a framework using like the page object model pattern, for example.
mm. Like I find for me, like I also said, as I said before, I started with Selenium WebDriver, but then I've learned others since then. I
Mhm.
found the first the hardest, and
Yeah,
I'm not saying it's easy to pick up others, but the learning curve for me was the most massive
yeah, with the
with the
first
first.
one. Yeah.
And then I think it's also because you learn how to learn. I don't have a computer science background, so it was like quite shocking
Mm.
um, to see like something that I felt came easy to other people didn't come easy for me. But I found it I found it fairly satisfying when things click
Yeah.
and when things start to click in your head and then things just start to make sense. That would be, or it still is, a lot of fun. Now, when you were when you're learning, looking back, is there anything that you regret doing that you would like
Mm.
do over to become more to learn more effectively or more
Yeah.
efficiently?
I guess it's not really sharing my learnings publicly. Um, because what I found was some of the stuff that I've learned, so before I was using um frameworks like Selenium with C sharp. So I was using like different programming languages. So there were some learnings that I've applied to my job, but because it's been more than like 5 6 years now, I've forgotten like how I've implemented that framework, how I've like written it in a way that was like easily to be extended, so all those types of things. So when I look back at it now, I'm like thinking, I should have tried to blog about it, or try to create like a GitHub like project, so at least I have like reference whenever I need it. Because I think now what's actually helped me every time I've moved to like different jobs is because I've blogged about certain areas that I've introduced from my previous work experiences. I found it really useful because I could apply some of the learnings that that I've done previously, and rather than me trying to reinvent the wheel, I can just say, "Oh yeah, I've done this, piece of code. Maybe we can try to adopt that in this like new project that I'm on." So if I could turn back time, yeah, I would probably share more of my learnings back then.
Did you ever like Google a question and then find one of your blog posts as on the Google search results page? I've done that one, so that was actually pretty cool. But
Yeah,
did that ever happen to you? Because you have a lot of how-to posts.
yeah. So I was
Okay.
actually, yeah. I've done the same thing because um, when I joined my current role in Zoopla, I wanted to introduce contract testing again, and I've done that on my previous role. So I just wanted to check. Oh yeah, okay. Let's try to integrate, pack contract testing, and then I type some keywords, and I'm like, oh yeah, I wrote something about that, and it's really nice as well because some of my colleagues like in Zoopla, they would Google something like, oh yeah, how to test iframes in Cypress. And then one of the engineering managers sent me a message to say that, hey, it's really cool because I found your blog post about this particular topic. I tried it out and it works. And it's just nice when you hear comments like that because it sort of iterates why I like to blog, why I like to share things publicly because it's useful, not just to me but to also but to other people as well.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Now, how long did it take you to get to competent level?
Mm.
And by competent, I'm going to say not necessarily expert, but where you'd felt comfortable doing test automation and it no longer felt like such a challenge.
Yeah. So I would say because when I was working as a test engineer, so I think it took me like a year and a half. Um because by then, so I got promoted to senior test engineer, and I think at that point, I got into a stage where, because I've learned the basics on like how to use a programming language, and I started using Java. I applied, the same concepts, because even if I got put into projects where, oh, the language has to be C sharp now, the language has to be like JavaScript, I felt that you really just need to make sure that you know the basics, like the basic concepts of, how to use like variables, or how to use if statements, like loops, things like that. Once you learn the basic concepts, I think jumping from one framework to another, um, it doesn't take much time to learn. So I guess when you mentioned a while ago that learning it the first time is really the difficult task, so I felt the same when I was trying to set up, Selenium with Java. um, I really struggled, and I was asking a lot of help from like the other contractors who were part of that project. But once I've actually tried to, do it myself, and when I say do it myself, before I wasn't even doing like best practices. So I was just, writing like a very um, simple test. I wasn't even using the page object model pattern, but I could, use like the different methods from like the Selenium like WebDriver. So I guess at that point, I started to then learn how to use, frameworks to make sure that it's easy to read, that it can be, reused by other like testers as well. So I think it got to a point where after about 1.5 years, um, being put into a project where it's sort of like a brand new challenge. But then most of the projects that I've been part of, it's really about, giving them a framework that can be reused, that uses um, frameworks like, I guess before, we were using tools like Cucumber, SpecFlow, if you're coming in from C Sharp. And then as long as you know the the basics of how to use the page object model pattern, I guess that really helped me in terms of, trying to feel that I'm quite, competent now. Because what I've realized working as a consultant is, even though the programming languages are different, the problem that they're trying to fix is mostly the same, which is how can we help them speed up their, regression test suite. And I guess for me, I guess for me, some people might say that um, there's other types of, test automation as well that we need to learn. But for me, it really sort of
By other
helped.
types, do you mean at different levels?
Yeah, so there's
Or
always like, for example, I've been reading, blogs that, when starting out, UI automation is the easiest, because we are seeing it as a user. And from that perspective, I agree, because I guess if you start learning, I don't know, API automation or like performance tests, it might be quite difficult. Whereas if you start to learn UI automation, because everything is like visible, and I guess as humans, we're a visible, type of person. So we like to see what we're learning. So I guess from that perspective, it makes sense why a lot of testers try to learn UI automation first. Um, the challenge though is, how can you then try to how can you then try to move to different types of, like test automation, because you can't just do UI automation, because there's also other, types of, I guess, like testing types that needs to be like automated. So I think rather than just focusing on the UI automation as a whole, you can start doing UI automation, but then also try to learn about other types of testing as well that you can automate.
Okay, so I guess this leans into the next question I wanted to ask you. What advice would you give to someone who's hoping to add test automation skills to their repertoire?
Yeah. I guess my first advice would be, um don't just watch like video tutorials, because I think some people call it like the tutorial hell, where you just buy a lot of tutorials from Udemy, from like Pluralsight, and then you accumulate a lot of these video tutorials. And after you've watched one, you're not really applying what you've learned, because um, especially with test automation, it's like riding a bike. You can't just read about it. You really have to try and like ride the bike, because that's how like we can learn. So if there's a way for you to try to practice what you've learned, and try to be consistent about it, I think that would really help, because I think you can build it as part of your positive habits, where like maybe you can allot like even 30 minutes a day, or if you want like an hour a day, just to sort of find something. So there's a lot of example websites out there that you can use, not just for UI automation, but you can also use it for API testing. You can use it for visual testing, for accessibility testing, if you also want to automate that. So you really just have to practice and be consistent about it. The next advice that I would probably give is, um, try to break it down into like smaller and manageable chunks. And I think this is why, so for me, what I try to do with things that I need to learn is, I try to break it down into like smaller, like objectives. And if that objective is still a bit big for me, then again, like try to break it down a bit more. So rather than, I guess, having an objective of, by the end of this week I should be able to create like a framework using different tools, what you can do is you can break that down into, okay, without using a framework first, how can I write a very basic simple test? And then you can then have another task wherein you can try to refactor that test, so that um, anything that's like duplicated, for example, are refactored. And then the next objective would be, okay, how can I then convert this into a framework, for example? So try to break it down into smaller chunks as much as possible. And the next advice is, if you're stuck, like just really ask for help. What really helped me with my career was, and I think before, because obviously when we were back at the office, it was much easier because you can just go into your colleague's desk. You can do like pair programming. You
Mm,
can ask questions. Oh, why did you do this, instead of like using it as a variable, for example. So
mm,
try to do a lot of that. And I think now we're well adopted as well into doing that remotely. So you can use, so if you're using VS Code, for example, they have a feature called Live Share, where you can really use it to for like pair programming. So you can easily see, I guess, what changes like someone is making into your code. So there's much more better ways now, if you want to do like pair programming remotely. But yeah, if you're really stuck, don't just, I guess, try and find the solution yourself. So if there's other people that you can ask, like any help on, then lean on them, and learn from like what they've like what they are trying to teach you. And then after that, try to use that learning and try to do it yourself, because programming is something that, I guess, if you're trying to learn test automation, like, you really have to, I guess, start with the basics as well. So if there's things that would benefit, for example, in you trying to ask other people, especially like developers, then use that benefit.
Hmm. One thing I'd like to add with asking for help is I've found it has helped to tell someone what I've done to try and solve the problem or what I've done. Like I've tried to describe my attempts.
Mm.
Um, and then while I ask for help, so then they know, like, okay, you were on the right track here. But then when you got to this point, this is kind of where you went wrong. I also find, I don't know, like from the receiving end of having people ask me for help with things,
Mm-hmm.
not a sign of respect. What's the word? Like it's it's just nice knowing that they've put in an effort
Mm-hmm.
themselves before they've gone to you for your time. That's how I feel. Um, but yeah. Now I've heard people talk about like what you should automate, what you should not automate, and why. But then, how can someone actually learn this?
Yeah. Yep. So one model that I've actually been introducing to my team members is Christine Jacquemin's test automation wheel. So I find that as a better sort of replacement rather than telling them about the test automation pyramid. Because at least with the test automation wheel, you can see what sort of tests can be automated and on what level as well. So for example, if you're working on a, I guess, on a pretty front end application, most of the time we tend to just focus on the functional tests. But if you use the test automation wheel as a guideline, you can also automate things like the visual component part. You can also automate accessibility. So there's actually lots of like free tools out there that you can use. So if you're just, I guess, looking at the test automation pyramid, it doesn't really say what you should automate. It tells you that if you automate as close to the code, then that will be like faster on, that will really provide a faster feedback. But then it doesn't say, okay, if I want to add like visual tests, how can I automate that? So I would probably um ask people just to really learn about what the test automation wheel is and how that can help them, because I really found it valuable. um, Another resource that I've um, watched in the past and I've tried to apply it to my work is Julia Pottinger. I hope I pronounce her name correctly, but she did this video. It's like a meetup video or like a conference video. It's like a guide on creating a test automation like strategy. So maybe like as part of this like description, we can share that link. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's
I'll
like really useful.
try and find. Sorry, I'll try and find the links to those, and I'll include in the description. So, but thanks heaps. Those are new to me, so thanks heaps for. Actually, I'd heard of the. I'd come across Julia's YouTube channel,
Mm-hmm.
and there's lots of good stuff there. But the test automation wheel is actually new to me.
Yeah,
I found automation and testing to be quite useful,
yeah,
as
that as
well
well.
as
Yeah,
Richard Bradshaw's blog.
yeah.
Now, that's all I was going to ask you today. Is there any, if someone wanted to get in contact with you or follow you on social media, how could someone go about doing that?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter at mcruisedrake. I also have a form on my blog, so there's a contact form there. I also have a Calendly like account link into my blog. So I've actually used that to also network with, other like software tests like professionals. So you can see like what my schedule looks like, and if there's like a free one, yep, I'd be more than happy to have a chat with you as well if my schedule also allows for it. But yeah, main thing is, yeah, I'm on Twitter at mcruisedrake.
Sweet. Thanks for joining me, and I'll catch you later.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah, bye bye.